I got this Nimbus Oracle 27.5-inch mountain unicycle from unicycle.com in March of 2023. I've been riding it for a little bit over a year now. It's a pretty common mountain unicycle in the US, mostly because of the cost, the wheel size, the stock parts that come on it, and we only have really two brands to choose from in the US for mountain unicycles, and this is the cheaper option. I wanted to give a review of this unicycle in the past year and some change that I've been riding it, about the things that broke, why they broke, things that didn't break, things that I've really appreciated, and maybe some other things that would be worthwhile to know about this unicycle. Let's start with the crank. This is a 150mm VCX crank built by Nimbus. I've been unicycling since 2006, and I've broken a lot of cranks. This crank has sustained a lot of drops, with me being roughly 225 pounds or 100 kilograms. Although I don't hit the drops that some of the elite mountain unicyclists make, I still think I put a fair amount of force on this crank when I do drop due to my weight and maybe my improper landing technique. And in the past 14 months, this crank has not budged. And that's saying something because I did actually bend the pedals. These pedals are plastic, but the axle is chromoly, and they're made by Nimbus, and they come stock with the Oracle 27.5. I'm assuming I broke them because mountain bikers usually take off the stock pedals on their mountain bikes anyway, and then just put on whatever they feel most comfortable with. I'm assuming unicyclists also do that, and I'm assuming Nimbus knew that and they wanted to give a cheap but effective stock pedal for the average rider. I have swapped these out for these turquoise race face pedals, and I've hit similar drops and they've been solid ever since. But that's saying something that I've bent the pedals before I bent the crank. Maybe that's common. The only downside of these cranks is they don't have an option for a threaded shorter crank arm. That would make it easier to just take off these pedals and thread them onto a shorter crank arm, so you get more bang for your buck if you're going a long distance. I don't do long distance that much, and if I did, it would probably be on a different unicycle. So that shorter thread would just be collecting dirt and dust and gunk anyway. But if you wanted to go long distance with this, it might be good to swap out this crank with something that is either a shorter crank arm or has an option for a shorter crank arm. Now let's talk about the wheel in general. This wheel size, 27.5, is a very popular mountain bike tire size. At least it was before everybody got hyped on 29ers. I chose a 27.5 because I was nervous that the 29 would be too big and I wouldn't be able to be as nimble on it. I did consider buying the 26-inch Nimbus Oracle, but I'm happy with my decision to buy a 27.5. I would really have to try the 26 and the 29 to offer a good comparison between the three, but the 27.5 was a happy medium. Aside from the size, the spoke, the rim, the tire, and the hub have really put up with a lot of abuse. And not just from drops or jumps or terrain. I've fallen so many times on this thing, and it's been thrown to the woods, and the fact that a rock hasn't smashed in a spoke or smashed in a rim is really beyond me. I really can't see any noticeable difference, let alone feel any noticeable difference while riding. Although I've had a lot of problems with like pop tubes and bent cranks, I never really had a problem with bent or warped or out of true rims or wheels. The only wheel related issue that I have had was that the tube blowing out of the tire, if it has too much air in it or maybe some other reason, I'm not really sure. I like to run high pressure in my tubes. It makes me feel like I have more control and I can feel the trail a little bit better. But if I put too much air in this tube, or if I land in a weird way, the tube might unseat the tire and take the entire tire off, and then you can't ride it until you deflate the tube, reseat the tire, and then inflate the tube again, which isn't a huge deal. All you need is an air pump and something smaller than an Allen wrench, but it is a small burden. I've been using the same tire that this Nimbus Oracle came with, and it's happened to me twice over the past 14 months. I'm not really sure why it happens. If you know, please let me know in the comments. I'm assuming it's my error, but for all I know, it could be any number of things. Now let's pop up to the seat post and the seat. I believe unicycle.com offers the option of 400mm seat posts, 300 and 200, with 300 being the default. I'm about 5'9" on a good day, and I like to ride with my seat a little bit lower, so 200mm is probably the better bet for me. But I went with a 300mm seat post because it was cheaper, and then I just cut the end off with a reciprocal saw and filed down the metal so there wasn't any sharp metal protrusions so close to my tire. The only issue that it caused was this hose length was a little bit long, which probably would have happened even if I did order the correct seat post length. But all I did was just loop it like this, and it hasn't really been a problem. But if you didn't have any tools to cut off the seat post, I would recommend actually measuring your inseam and using unicycle.com's recommendations for how long of a seat post you need. Now the seat itself broke about 3 to 4 months into me riding it. Well, I definitely did something to my seat. I don't think I'm supposed to do that. It was probably a result of bad takeoff, bad landing, bad riding. I mean, just overall bad technique, and me weighing a little bit extra than most people would weigh, and me landing right in the front part of the seat. I kept the seat I broke, and even though it's severed at the hard plastic down below, the fabric and the cushion make it all one piece. So even if you were just gonna like ride through the trails, this would still be useful and it would still get the job done. I replaced it with a Chris Holm freeride saddle, and it's been fine ever since, although I haven't hit that big of a drop and landed that poorly on this one, so who's to say? Unicycle.com actually gave me a crash credit when I broke this one to buy a new one. I also did hear from one of my viewers that you can get an impact plate on unicycle.com to go under the seat and right above the brake mount to prevent you breaking your seat from landing just like this, landing too far in the front of the saddle. I didn't know about this, so it might have helped retain my original Nimbus seat. So if you're not going to be landing any big drops poorly, this seat will be just fine, especially if you have a compatible impact plate. Otherwise, the Chris Holm seat might be a little bit more expensive, but I've had no problems with it so far, and I've ridden twice as long with this seat as I have with this seat. You can take that for what you will. Lastly, this brake is fantastic. It's a Shimano 180mm hydraulic disc brake. Especially if you're going down steep downhill on a unicycle, you really want a strong brake because your legs aren't strong enough to withstand the momentum of the unicycle itself on the upstroke. What I really like about this brake is it's sensitive enough that I can make small adjustments and get big results on the power of my braking, but it's not too sensitive that if I only move it just a hair, that the whole thing will lock up and I'll go flying. It's almost like trying to drive a manual car. When you pull up on that clutch, you have to hit that sweet spot for what you need to actually accelerate. And in this case, you actually have to toggle where you need the brake and how much braking power you need for your slope and how fast you're going. And the Shimano brakes give you amazing ability to do just that, but just with a unicycle. Overall, I really like this unicycle, especially for my first real year mountain unicycling. I'm still getting used to the bigger wheel, the speed, the taller seat, and the brakes since I've only really ever used 20-inch unicycles. The one thing I'm still getting used to on this unicycle is if there's a rock or a ledge that I want to jump onto, before I jump, I'm always hesitant and I always think, is my tire gonna clip it? Do I have enough height? But that'll probably just come in more time and me getting more practice with getting onto things on this unicycle. So I hope this review of the 27.5 Nimbus Oracle was helpful if you're thinking of buying one or you're trying to figure out if you want to buy the 26 or the 29 or the Chris Holm or some other brand in your country. But everything's a balancing act. If I don't have the maneuverability or maybe the control that I would on a 26, I still have the speed and the ability to roll over things that I wouldn't have on a 27.5 compared to that 26er. But what I would recommend is swapping out these stock pedals because they're plastic, and even though they have metal prongs, I still think Nimbus knew that somebody's going to take these off and replace them for a preferred pedal, especially because it's so frustrating maneuvering your feet. Once you find a pedal that will allow you to move your feet around while you're mounted, but still stay grippy, you want to stick with that. But if nothing else, consider swapping out the pedals because everybody has this unicycle, and swapping out the pedals for maybe a different color or a different style would make you not have the same exact unicycle as everybody you ride with. But I would still recommend these as just a regular riding pedal because I don't see a reason not to. So I hope this review was helpful, and let me know in the comments if you have this unicycle in your experience or if you want to add anything to what I just mentioned. And consider subscribing if you want more unicycle content. Thanks and good luck.